They call me the man who bought the broken orchard at the end of Creighton Road. I didn't mind the name. In a town like Hartfield, Ontario, population 900 and something, depending on the season, you got called by what you owned before you got called by your name. My name is James Alderton. I was 32 when I moved back to the county after 6 years in Toronto working construction management. I came back because my grandfather had died and left me 40 acres of apple trees that hadn't been properly tended in 3 years, a farmhouse that smelled like wood smoke and old wool, and a note that said, simply, "Do something real with it, James. You always needed roots more than you knew." I thought he was being sentimental. The old man had a habit of that. I spent the first 3 months just getting the land back under control. The trees hadn't been pruned. The equipment shed roof had caved on one side under a bad ice storm the previous February. The irrigation lines along the east row had cracked in the freeze. My neighbor to the north, a retired school teacher named Harold Beaumont, came over one evening in early May with a 6-pack of Molson and sat on my porch steps and told me I'd taken on more than I understood. "Your grandfather managed it because he'd done it for 50 years, Harold said. "You haven't done it for 50 minutes. I'll figure it out." Harold looked at the orchard, at the long uneven rows going dark in the evening light. "You know the Renaud place sold," he said. It wasn't a question. "Across the road, corner lot." I knew the Renaud place. Old farmhouse, about 12 acres, a barn that had been converted into a workshop at some point. The Renauds had moved to Sudbury to be near their daughter. The property had been sitting empty for almost a year. "Somebody buy it?" "A woman," Harold said. He took a long drink of his beer, young, came alone, drove up in a Subaru with Quebec plates and 2 suitcases and a toolbox in the back. I didn't think much of it that night. People moved to the county from Quebec all the time, looking for cheaper land, quieter lives. I met her 3 days later. Her name was Lucy Garneau. She was 29 years old, and she was standing in her driveway at 7 in the morning, trying to figure out why her well pump wasn't working. I'd driven past on my way to the feed co-op, and I saw her crouched beside the pressure tank with a flashlight, her dark hair pulled back, wearing canvas work pants and a faded gray sweatshirt with the word McGill across the chest. I almost didn't stop. I almost kept driving. But the pressure tank, I could see from the road that the pressure gauge was reading 0, and the switch beside it had that particular look of a burned contact. And I'd fixed enough of them on job sites over the years to know it was a 30-minute problem if you had the right part. I pulled over. "Pressure switch is gone," I said through my window. She looked up at me. She didn't say anything for a moment. She had the kind of face that didn't rush to trust, which I respected. "I'm James Alderton," I said. "I have the orchard across the road. Your well's not a pump problem, it's a switch. Do you have a spare?" "I just moved in," she said. "I don't have anything yet." "There's one at Henderson's Hardware in town. I can tell you what to ask for, or I can drive back and get it. Either way." She looked at me for another moment. Then she stood up, wiped her hands on her pants, and said, "I'll come with you." That was how it started. Not romantically. Not the way things start in stories where people tell you they knew from the first moment. It started with a broken pressure switch and a woman who wanted to come with me rather than wait for help, which told me more about her character in 5 seconds than most people reveal in 5 conversations. Her name was Lucy Garneau, and she had moved from Montreal. She'd been a landscape architect, working for a firm in the Plateau. She'd saved for 7 years to buy land. She wanted to grow lavender and native plants on a commercial scale, sell to florists and organic markets in Ottawa and Toronto. She'd done her research. She knew her soil composition, her drainage requirements, her frost dates. What she hadn't known was how isolating it would be. "My family thinks I've lost my mind," she told me that day, on the drive back from Henderson's. "My mother called it a breakdown. My father said I was running away." "Were you?" She looked out the window at the flat stretch of county road, the cedar rail fences going past. "I was running towards something," she said. "That's different." I thought about my grandfather's note. "You always needed roots more than you knew." "Yeah," I said. "That's different. We became neighbors in the way you do in a place like Hartfield, which is to say, slowly, with a lot of showing up without calling first and standing at fence lines talking about fence-related things that weren't really about fences." She helped me identify which of my trees had fire blight and needed to come out before it spread. I helped her get her barn's electrical panel up to code so she could run the propagation lighting she needed for her seedlings. We ate supper at each other's tables maybe once a week by late June, splitting whatever we'd cooked too much of. I want to be careful here not to make it sound simpler than it was. Because there was also Arthur Vickers, Arthur Vickers owned the large property at the south end of Creighton Road, 260 acres of mixed farmland, a cattle operation, and a gravel pit that he'd been running since the 80s. He was 63 years old, and he'd been the largest landowner in this part of the county for 30 years. He wasn't a cruel man exactly, but he was a man who had spent 3 decades believing that what happened in this part of the county was his business, and that belief had calcified into something harder than it started as. He came to see me in July, a Tuesday morning, driving his F-350 down my lane without calling. "That woman across the road," he said. He was standing in my equipment shed doorway. I was rebuilding a conveyor belt fitting, and I kept working while he talked. "The one from Quebec, Lucy Garneau," I said. "Her name is Lucy Garneau." He didn't acknowledge the correction. "She's been talking to the county about agricultural water permits, pulling new irrigation rights from the Creighton Creek tributary. She's starting a lavender operation. She needs irrigation." "We all need irrigation, James. That tributary feeds my south pasture. My grandfather negotiated that water access in 1961. The county gives that woman a new draw permit. It affects my flow rates. The county processes that through the Conservation Authority," I said. "It's not personal. In this county, everything is personal." He looked at me the way older men sometimes look at younger ones. Not with contempt exactly, more like patience worn thin. "You'd do well to remember you're new here again. 6 years in Toronto doesn't make a person a stranger, but it doesn't keep their relationships fresh either. You'll need support from your neighbors. Don't pick the wrong side before you understand the sides." After he left, I stood in the equipment shed for a long time. My grandfather had known Arthur Vickers for decades. They'd had their tensions and their understandings. I was 32 years old, and I had no idea what the understanding was supposed to be now. Walked across the road. Lucy was in the barn, potting cuttings under her propagation lights. The lavender smell was already there, faint and warm, even this early in the growing season. "Arthur Vickers came to see me," I said. She kept working. She had a system. Cuttings from a tray to her left, into the potting medium, one at a time, steady rhythm. "I know," she said. "He came here first. Yesterday, what did he say?" "He said the tributary permit might be complicated." She set a cutting carefully into the pot. "He said he had a long relationship with the county water authority." She looked up at me. "He said if I was smart, I'd look at municipal water hookup instead and leave the creek alone." "What did you say?" I said my water rights assessment was done by a certified hydrologist and filed properly with the Conservation Authority, and if he had a competing claim, he was welcome to file his own documentation and we'd let the process work. I almost smiled. "How'd he take that?" "He told me I'd find the county harder than Montreal." She turned back to her cuttings. "He's not wrong that it's hard here, but he's wrong about what I'm going to do about it." The permit process dragged through August. The Conservation Authority asked for a second assessment, then a third-party review. Lucy paid for all of it out of her savings, which I knew were not infinite. I knew because she'd been honest with me. She had enough to get through the first 2 years if nothing went badly wrong. The permit delays were eating into her contingency. In September, a contractor showed up at her property. He was there when I came back from the feed co-op, a truck parked across her lane, 2 men getting out, clipboards in hand. She was already outside. Standing on her porch, arms crossed. "They say they're doing an easement survey," she said when I came over, "on behalf of a numbered company." I looked at the survey stakes they'd put along the eastern edge of her property line. Her property line. Who authorized this? One of the men looked up. He had a clipboard and an apologetic face. "Survey's been ordered through the county," he said. "Easement inquiry for a right-of-way access." "To what?" Lucy asked. "Can't tell you more than that, ma'am. It's an inquiry, not an approved order. You'll get notice from the county." After they left, I called Harold Beaumont, because Harold had been in this county his whole life, and he knew things that took other people decades to accumulate. "Numbered company," Harold said when I described it. "I'd look at who filed the right-of-way inquiry. That's public record at the county office." It took me most of a day and a trip to the county planning office in Campbellford to find it. The numbered company was 2847391 Ontario Inc. The registered director was a name I didn't recognize, Gareth Lowry, but the listed business address was the same rural route as Arthur Vickers' cattle operation. He was trying to establish a right-of-way through Lucy's eastern edge, probably to access the gravel pit expansion he'd been talking about for years. The route through her land was shorter and cheaper than routing through his own back 40. If he got the easement, it would run a gravel access road directly through the portion of land she'd planned for her largest lavender field. She was quiet for a long time after I showed her what I'd found. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No," I said. "He's not the kind of man who stops." "So what do I do?" I didn't answer right away. I sat down at her kitchen table, the old harvest table that had come with the farmhouse, painted white at some point and worn down to wood at the corners, and I thought about what my grandfather would have done. The old man had dealt with Vickers for years. He'd never fought him directly. He'd outmaneuvered him, Harold had once told me, which was a different thing. "You file an objection to the easement inquiry," I said. "You have 30 days from the county notice, and you get a lawyer. Not someone in Campbellford who knows Vickers. Someone in Peterborough. I can't afford. You file the objection yourself. It's a form. The lawyer's just for the hearing if it comes to that." I looked at her, "And I'm going to file an objection too." "You don't have standing." "It's not your property. I have a shared fence line on the north end of your lot and a documented water drainage pattern that runs from your east field across my south corner. That's enough standing for an interested party objection." My grandfather's lawyer drew up that drainage agreement in 1987. "It's registered." She looked at me for a long time. In the lamplight, her face was unreadable in the way it had been that first morning in the driveway, the face of a person who had learned to look before she trusted. "Why are you doing this?" she said. "You've been here less than a year. You don't need to make an enemy of Vickers over my easement." I didn't have a clean answer for her. I'm not sure I had an answer at all, not a stated one. I just knew that when I'd driven past that morning in May and seen her crouched beside the pressure tank, something in the situation had felt like a question I was supposed to answer. And every month since, the question had been getting harder to walk away from. "Because it's the right thing," I said, which felt inadequate. But it was true. The county hearing was set for the third week of November. The Conservation Authority permit for the irrigation came through in October. Full approval, no conditions, because the hydrologist's documentation was solid and Vickers' competing claim had no technical basis. That was a smaller victory, but it mattered. The easement hearing was different. Gareth Lowry showed up with a lawyer from Toronto. Arthur Vickers sat in the back of the county meeting room and didn't say a word for the first hour. The numbered company's legal argument was that the right-of-way was a legacy access route that had existed informally for decades and that the new property owner had no grounds to block formalization. Lucy's lawyer, a woman named Diane Kowalski from Peterborough, had spent 3 weeks preparing. She had survey records going back to 1952. She had aerial photographs from 1978, 1989, 1996, 2003, and 2011. There was no informal access route. The ground along the eastern edge of the property had been fenced and maintained as a private boundary for every year those photographs documented. My drainage agreement, it turned out, mattered more than I'd expected. The 1987 document established that the boundary drainage between the properties had been managed cooperatively and privately, which contradicted the claim that the land had ever served as a general access corridor. The hearing officer, a county administrator named William Paquette, who had the quietly exhausted look of a man who had seen a great many property disputes, adjourned for 2 weeks. When he returned his decision in December, it was a full denial of the easement inquiry. He cited insufficient evidence of historical usage, and he cited the drainage agreement. Gareth Lowry's company had 30 days to appeal. They didn't. Arthur Vickers didn't come to see me after the decision. He didn't come to see Lucy. The F-350 still went past on Creighton Road sometimes, and when it did, I watched it go by from wherever I was standing on my land, and it went straight to wherever it was going. Harold Beaumont told me later that Vickers had found a different route for the gravel road expansion. Longer, more expensive, but entirely on his own land. "He's not a man who forgives," Harold said, "but he's a man who moves on, eventually." That winter was the first one in years I didn't mind. I'd always found Januaries hard, the gray sky sitting low over everything, the way the hours get slow and identical. But that year, I had the farmhouse properly insulated for the first time in what I suspected was its history, and a wood stove in the kitchen that Lucy had helped me install in November. And on the evenings she came across the road, we'd sit with tea, or something warmer, and she'd tell me about what she was planning for the spring plantings, and I'd tell her about what I was learning about the orchard. I was learning a great deal about the orchard. I was also learning a great deal about what it meant to pay attention to someone over time. Not in the breathless way of new things. In the slow way, the way you notice that someone always moves the teacup to the same spot on the table, and that they go quiet when they're worried rather than loud. and that they laugh at things other people don't find funny, and don't laugh at things other people perform as funny, and that these small, consistent things are more revealing than anything a person tells you on purpose. I didn't say anything about it for a long time. Some things need to be entirely clear before you speak them, or speaking them makes them smaller than they were. In February, Lucy's mother came to visit from Montreal. Her name was Ghislaine Garneau, and she drove from Montreal in a Volvo and arrived on a Friday evening with 2 bags and a look on her face that was somewhere between relief and assessment. I met her the next morning when Lucy brought her over to see the orchard in the snow. Ghislaine Garneau shook my hand very firmly and looked at me with dark eyes that were clearly her daughter's eyes, 25 years ahead. "My daughter says you helped her with the county situation," she said. "We helped each other," I said. "She says you're a practical man. I try to be." Ghislaine looked at the orchard, at the rows of apple trees standing bare in the February light, dark branches against white fields. "Your grandfather built this? He planted it with his father. 1964, the first rows." She was quiet for a moment. "My husband was a practical man," she said. "I always thought it was a small thing. I know now it's not." She stayed for 4 days. On the last evening the 3 of us ate supper together. Lucy had made tourtière from her grandmother's recipe, and the farmhouse on Lucy's side of the road was warm and smelled like pastry and herbs. And Ghislaine told stories about Lucy as a child, methodically arranging her grandmother's garden, labeling everything with hand-painted sticks. "She has always known exactly what she wanted," Ghislaine said. "The problem was never that. The problem was finding the place where what she wanted could fit." Later, after Ghislaine had gone to bed, Lucy walked me to the door. It was cold out, -17, the breath visible in clouds, and she stood in the doorway with the warm light behind her. "My mother likes you," she said. "I like her." She looked at me, that long, unrushed look. "James?" "Yeah. I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I want you to know that, in case it's something you've been wondering about." It was something I'd been wondering about. In the way you wonder about things you're afraid to weight too heavily in case they tip. "I wasn't going to ask," I said. "I know. That's why I told you." Spring came back to the county the way it always does. All at once, too fast after months of nothing. The snow went in 2 weeks in late March, and the ground came up soft and cold, and the apple trees on my 40 acres began to bud in a sequence I was starting, for the first time, to understand. Lucy's lavender seedlings went into the ground in the east field, the field that would have been bisected by Vickers gravel road, in the second week of May, on a morning that was cool and bright and smelled like turned earth. I was helping her plant. We'd been out there since early morning, working along the rows. Harold Beaumont came by with coffee in a thermos at 10 o'clock and stood at the field edge, watching us for a while. "Your grandfather would have liked this," Harold said, handing me the cup. I looked out at the field, at the lines of small plants going in, the orchard visible beyond the fence line to the north, the old farmhouse at the road end, at Lucy 3 rows over, bent to the work with the same focused quiet she brought to everything. "Yeah," I said. "He would have." Harold left. We kept working. Around noon, Lucy stood and stretched her back and looked down the length of what we'd planted. "It doesn't look like much yet," she said. "It will." She squinted at the rows. By August, it'll be something." She looked over at me. Something moved across her face that she let stay, which was not a thing she did lightly. "I think he knew," she said. "Your grandfather." "Knew what?" "That this would happen." She gestured at the field, the fence line, the 2 properties sitting across the road from each other, that you'd come back and there'd be someone across the road who needed roots too. She paused. "I think he left you the orchard because he knew you, and he knew that you needed a reason that was real. Not a career, not a contract, a reason you couldn't walk away from." I thought about the note in the kitchen drawer. "Do something real with it, James. You always needed roots more than you knew." "He didn't know you were coming," I said. "No. But he knew someone like me would." I didn't answer right away. The wind came through the field and the small lavender plants moved together in it like they were made for being moved. "He was a practical man too," I said finally. She laughed. "The real kind, not the performed kind. So that's what we are? Practical." She bent back to the work. "I'll take it." That August, the lavender bloomed, and the east field turned the color of a bruise in the best possible way. Deep purple running toward the fence line, visible from the road. People slowed down on Creighton Road to look at it. A woman from a florist in Peterborough drove up the lane and stood in the field for 20 minutes before she placed an order. A food blogger from Ottawa posted a photograph and tagged the county tourism board. On the last evening of August, Lucy and I walked the field at dusk, the way we'd started doing. The lavender smell was heavy in the warm air. At the far end, where the east fence line ran, you could see my apple trees going dark in the last light, the fruit heavy on the branches, the first of the macks almost ready. Lucy stopped at the corner post, the old cedar post that marked the corner of her property and the beginning of mine. Someone had set it there before either of us was born, in the ground of this county, in the solid particular way of things meant to last. She put her hand on the post. "I called my mother today," she said. "She asked when she should come back for a visit." "What did you tell her?" "I told her October." She looked at me. "I told her there was going to be something worth seeing in October." I knew what she meant. I'd been carrying the thing I wanted to say for long enough that it had its own weight now. Not a burden, just a presence. Something you carry until the right moment, and then you put it down. "October's good," I said. She took her hand off the fence post and put it in mine. We stood there at the corner of both our properties, in the last of the August light, the lavender behind us and the apple trees ahead, the county going quiet around us the way it does at the end of a long working day. Not empty, just settled. The way things feel when they are finally exactly where they are supposed to be. My grandfather had known something about roots, about what it meant to stay somewhere long enough that the place started to know you back. He was right.